happy day.
Happy day.
Oh, happy day.
Oh, happy day.
Oh, happy day.
Oh, yes it was.
When Jesus.
Yes.
Now we're ready for book number 2. The name of this book is St. Peter and St. Paul. Those men don't dress like men do today, do they? Okay, let's open up the book. And we turn the pages until we come where the story starts. There's one picture, and then here's another picture. And there comes a lady through the door. This is about after Jesus had died on the cross. After Jesus had been put to death, his disciples were very sad. They thought at first that they would never see him again. But on the 3rd day after he had been killed, he rose from the dead. Mary Magdalene, who had loved him very much, saw him in the garden of the tomb where he had been buried. She had told the disciples that he had spoken to her. They would not believe her until they had seen Jesus again for themselves. See, they're all surprised that she says he's still alive. Turn. One night, Peter and John and some other disciples went to fish on the Sea of Galilee, but they caught nothing. Early the next morning, they saw someone standing on the shore, but they did not know who it was. The person said, "Cast your net on the right side of the ship." Who do you suppose it was? The disciples did, and found that they could not draw in the net because it was so heavy with fish. John said to the others, "That is Jesus." And when Peter heard John, he jumped into the sea and swam to the shore, and the others followed in a little boat, dragging the net after them. Turn. Jesus had made a fire on the shore, and he said, "Come and dine," and he gave them bread and fish to eat. Presently he said to Peter, "Do you love me?" Peter said, "Yes, Lord, you know I do." Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." Twice more Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me?" Each time Peter said, "Yes, Lord, you know I do." Then Jesus said, "Follow me." Later, the day of Pentecost came. All the disciples were in a room. The Spirit of God came to them. Turn. After Pentecost, Peter and John and James went with the other disciples to many places, teaching about Jesus. They healed a great many people. They and their followers shared everything they had, food, clothes, and money. No one was hungry or cold. The people used to bring their ill friends to lie where Peter's shadow might fall on them. They believed that it would be enough to make them well. Lots of sick people, weren't they? Couldn't walk. Turn. One of the men who followed the disciples and believed in their teaching was a Greek called Stephen. The high priests and the elders of the temple were angry that he preached about Jesus and healed people. They talked some people into saying that Stephen had been speaking against God. They took him outside the city and stoned him to death. Turn. A young Jewish man called Saul stood there watching Stephen die. He was pleased because he hated the Christians who followed the teachings of Jesus. The men who were stoning Stephen had left Saul to look after their clothes. Turn. Saul continued to persecute the Christians. He set out for Damascus, meaning to bring Christians back to Jerusalem as prisoners. On the road to Damascus, suddenly a great light shone around him. He fell to the earth and heard a voice calling, "Saul, why do you persecute me?" Saul trembled and said, "Who are you?" The voice said, "I am Jesus. Get up and go into the city." For 3 days Saul was blind. Then God gave him back his sight. Turn the page. Now Saul believed that Jesus was the Son of God, and he went about preaching and teaching about him. He became known as Paul. The Jews were angry when they heard about Paul's preaching. They watched the gates of Damascus by day and by night so that they could catch him and kill him when he came out. But the disciples let him down over a wall at night in a basket. When Paul reached Jerusalem, he wanted to join the other Christians, but they were afraid of him until they heard how he had preached boldly about Jesus in Damascus. It was a pretty little basket for him to have to sit in, wasn't it? Turn. Soon after, Herod, the king of Judea, decided to kill Peter to please the Jews. He threw Peter into prison, guarded by 4 groups of soldiers. He meant to kill Peter after Passover. The night before Peter was to be killed, as he lay asleep, a great light shone in the prison, and the angel of the Lord struck Peter on the side and said, "Get up quickly. Put on your sandals and your clothes." The chains fell off Peter's hands, and he followed the angel out of the prison. As they went, the prison gates opened by themselves. Turn. Paul traveled to many different countries, preaching and healing the sick. Everywhere he had been, he left new groups of Christians. When he was in Jerusalem, the Jews turned him out of the temple. The captain of the guard bound Paul's hands and took him to the castle. "Let me speak to you," Paul said. "Can you speak Greek? Are you an Egyptian?" the captain asked. Paul said, "I am a Jew from Tarsus. Are you also a Roman?" The captain said, "Yes, but I had to pay a great price for it." Paul said, "I was free-born, a citizen of Rome." He talked up to him, didn't he? Turn the page. Paul was brought before 2 governors of Judea. The first to question him was Felix, who allowed him to live in Jerusalem free to see his friends. 2 years later, a new governor, Festus, questioned Paul. Paul said, "I have done no wrong against the laws of the Jews, nor against the laws of Caesar. Caesar should judge me." Festus sent Paul to stand before Agrippa the king. After Agrippa had heard Paul speak, he said, "You almost persuade me to become a Christian." Turn. Paul was to sail to Italy to see Caesar. Because the winds were against them, they sailed by Cyprus to the city of Myra. Turn. There they found a ship from Alexandria which would take them to Italy. They sailed slowly for many days and reached Crete. Now the winter was coming, and Paul warned the captain and the soldiers that it was too dangerous to go farther. But the master of the ship was determined to go on. After they had left Crete, a tempest drove the ship before it toward dangerous quicksands. There was no sun nor stars to steer by, and everyone on board the ship thought that they would die. The ship's turning. Water's going clear over the top of it. Turn. Then Paul spoke to them. "Be of good cheer. No man shall lose his life, but we must lose the ship when we are cast upon a certain island." At last, one night, as the ship was driven up and down by the wind, the sailors found that they were near land. Some of the sailors wanted to escape in the small boat, but Paul said, "You can only be saved if you stay in the ship." As the day broke, Paul told the men to eat to give them strength. They then threw out the cargo to lighten the ship. They saw an unknown shore with a creek where they thought they might land. They hoisted the mainsail and ran the ship into the ground. The front of the ship stuck fast, but the back was broken up. Then the sailors and the soldiers and the prisoners swam to the beach, some alone, others with planks of wood from the ship. They had landed on the island of Malta. Sometime later, Paul at last reached Rome, where he was allowed to live outside the prison and to teach people about the Christian church. Turn the page. See the map where it shows about Paul's trip and the broken up ship?